Hey guys, what's up? It's Savannah. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another true crime video. As you guys can tell by the title of today's video, today we are talking about the case of Jeanette DePalma, and this is a case unlike any that we really have ever covered before on this channel, for the reason being that Jeanette's case really heavily dives into a lot of different theories, but a lot of the main theories in this case consist of witchcraft, Satanism, satanic rituals, and sacrifice. Those are big theories in this case, and that's not really anything we've ever dealt with in previous cases that we've covered here before. Before we jump into it today, I want to say thank you to our two sponsors, which are HelloFresh and Zola. So if y'all have never heard about HelloFresh, HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. They offer convenient delivery right to your doorstep for easy home cooking with your family or just by yourself. The recipes are easy to follow and quick to make with simple steps and pictures to guide you along the way. HelloFresh offers so many delicious options every week to help you break out of your recipe rut and to try new things. HelloFresh also delivers pre-proportioned ingredients, so you're not overbuying, which is always a burden on the planet and your wallet. HelloFresh is committed to making fresh, delicious food available now more than ever and has taken extra steps to keep its employees and customers safe. HelloFresh has been a lifesaver for me when it comes to time management. I'm someone who loves nourishing my body with proper nutrients. But with a crazy busy schedule, it isn't always the easiest to map out, which is why I'm very thankful that HelloFresh takes care of that for me. If you guys want to try out HelloFresh today, you can do so by going to HelloFresh.com and using my code KILLER80. Again, just go to HelloFresh.com/KILLER80 and use the code KILLER80 to get $80 off, including free shipping. Now, I want to thank our second sponsor of this video that I'm so excited about, which is Zola. Now, personally, I am the farthest thing from getting engaged, marriage, any of that, nowhere near it. But if any of you are in relationships and thinking about getting married, or if you get married down the line, if you're engaged right now, if you know someone who is engaged, this is going to be great for you. Zola makes wedding planning easier and less stressful by creating everything couples need all in one place. With Zola, you'll be able to pick wedding vendors, save the dates, invitations, free websites, your registry, and more. With Zola, you can fast track your search for the right venue and photographer. All vendors are pre-scanned, so you can skip the endless back and forth with vendors who aren't right for you. You can also explore save the dates and invitations with hundreds of beautiful, affordable designs. All purchases include free shipping, free matching envelopes, and free guest addressing. You'll be able to create a free wedding website with Zola, which is the easiest way to share details and updates with your guests about your wedding day. And you can also hold virtual events on Zola for free as well. Zola has the most fun and easy registry process ever. If you guys want to try out Zola, you can go to zola.com/killer today and use the promo code SAVE50, that's just SAVE50, to get 50% off your save the dates. You can also get free personalized paper samples before you purchase. That's zola.com/killer and use the promo code SAVE50. So thank you to our sponsors for sponsoring today's video. And with that being said, let's jump right on into the case. So this is Jeanette DePalma. Jeanette was born on August 3rd, 1956 in Jersey City, New Jersey, to her parents, Florence and Salvatore DePalma. Jeanette was born into a large Italian family. She was one of 5 daughters and also had 3 brothers as well. So all in all, she was one of 8 children. And Jeanette was described as a kind and beautiful young woman. She had dark hair and brown eyes. And Jeanette was also pretty religious. She was an evangelist and planned on attending Bible college after high school. Now, while it's said that Jeanette did dive heavily into her religion, she attended church with her family all the time, and that she was a very religious woman, it was also said by some of the people that went to school with Jeanette that Jeanette's religion was more so pushed onto her by her family, and that she definitely had a rebellious and wild side to her as well. So I wanted to mention both descriptions just because I think that there might be truth in both. It's not to say that it's just one over the other in this case. It's very much possible that she did have a wild side, but was also heavily into her religion as well. So I just think that it's important to look at the bigger picture here. So let's jump to the day that that Jeanette went missing, and Jeanette was only 16 years old when she went missing on August 7th, 1972. Jeanette was living in Springfield Township, New Jersey at the time of her disappearance, and on the day that she went missing, Jeanette told her mother that she was going to be taking the train to a friend's house. However, Jeanette never returned home that night. And Jeanette was not the type of girl that would go out and not come home without calling anyone. If she ever had a change of plans, she usually always got in contact with someone to let them know about her updated plans and when she was going to be home. So when Jeanette never made it home on the night of August 7th, her parents wasted no time in immediately contacting the police to file a missing persons report. Now, for the following 6 weeks after August 7th, Jeanette remained missing. No one knew where she was. No one had heard from her. No one had seen her. There had been no possible sightings of Jeanette. That was until September 19th, 1972, when everything changed. So let me break down this story because it does kind of sound a little outlandish. Honestly, when I first tell it to you, you're probably going to be a little shook by it. So on September 19th, 1972, there was an owner who was walking their dog, and they were walking the dog, and the dog went off by itself for a little bit and then ultimately returned back to its owner. And the dog, as well as the owner, were walking through a park, and this park was called Springfield's Houdaille Quarry. And I apologize if the pronunciation on that is wrong. It probably is. So the dog and the owner were walking through that park, and when the dog returned to the owner noticed that this dog had something in its mouth. It had brought back something for the owner, and at closer look, the owner of this dog realized that the thing that was in their dog's mouth was a decomposing, amputated arm. So this dog had brought back to its owner an arm, a human arm, mind you. Obviously, as you can imagine, this absolutely shook this dog's owner, and the owner immediately contacted the authorities. And at this time in this town, everyone knew that Jeanette was missing. Everyone was on the lookout for Jeanette. Her face was everywhere throughout the town on missing persons flyers and posters. So when this owner saw that the dog brought back an arm, they thought immediately that it could possibly be Jeanette. So authorities were called, and they arrived at the park, and they immediately started searching all throughout the park. And once they started searching the area that the dog was thought to have walked through, that is when they discovered the body of Jeanette DePalma. Jeanette's body was discovered lying face down on top of a cliff in this park. And authorities have said that when Jeanette's body was discovered, like I said, it was face down, but it was also said that Jeanette's body was actually outlined with rocks and sticks that were laying in a cross-like formation, as if someone had placed the sticks to lay like a cross. Jeanette's body was so decomposed at the time that it was discovered that authorities were only able to confirm that this actually was Jeanette through dental records. Her body was laying up there for possibly the entire 6 weeks. So she had gone through a bunch of different weather conditions. It's New Jersey. And because of the state of decomposition that Jeanette was in, there was actually no autopsy performed because they simply couldn't perform one based off of how decomposed her body was. Even though there was no autopsy, there were x-rays of Jeanette's skull taken to see if there were any fractures or any bullet holes or just any noticeable injuries. However, there was nothing discovered. And to this day, Jeanette's cause of death has actually never been confirmed. However, even though it hasn't been confirmed, the medical examiner did speculate that Jeanette's cause of death more than likely was strangulation or overdose. Those were the two that it was narrowed down to at the end of it. Even though there was no autopsy done, one thing that the medical examiner did discover was that there was an unusually high amount of lead in Jeanette's system at the time that her body was discovered. And to this day, there's never really been any rhyme or reason for that. No one has ever been able to figure out why she had such a high amount of lead in her system. Now, when the news of Jeanette's body being discovered was released to the public, this obviously had everyone very shaken up and very scared. Clearly, there was a murderer on the loose in Springfield, and no one could figure out who it was or what had happened to Jeanette, or even why anyone would want to hurt Jeanette in the first place. A couple months following the discovery of her body in January 1973, the FBI actually tested listed Jeannette's clothing that she was wearing when her body was discovered, which included her t-shirt, pants, and underwear, along with some of the dirt surrounding the area where her body was found. However, the FBI stated that there were, quote, no apparent foreign hairs found on her clothing. However, something that was discovered was the stains found in her underwear, bra, blouse, and pants. However, the problem here were that these stains were, quote unquote, too decomposed to get a proper sample of what the stains could be a cause of. So they weren't able to figure out what the stains were. However, there were stains. Now, I want to take a step back and talk about what was actually happening in the United States at the time of Jeannette's murder. And the reason that this is important is because it falls into some of the theories that we're going to be talking about regarding witchcraft, Satanism, satanic rituals, sacrifice, all of that. So we're just going to do a very brief history lesson with this one. So this was 1972, and at this time, a lot of Americans were going through something often referred to as the Jesus movement. And this is when the so-called hippie generation was kind of mellowing out, and a lot of families were turning to more religious beliefs. I'm sure you guys have heard of the hippie era and the hippie movement and things like that. So it was kind of the time where people were steering more away from that and steering to more traditional values. But even though certain people were turning to more Christian and evangelical beliefs, a lot of people were also getting into Satanism and witchcraft as well. Just 11 days after Jeannette's body was discovered, the Home News Tribune wrote an article saying, quote, authorities were investigating the possibility that witchcraft and Satan worship were involved in the death of Jeannette. End quote. And less than 2 miles away from where Jeannette's body was discovered, there were actually a reported number of sacrifices that involved dead animals. So because of all of this, at the time that Jeannette's body was discovered, the rumor mill really started turning. And a lot of people believed it was very possible that Jeannette's death was a part of a satanic ritual or a sacrifice. Just 2 weeks after the discovery of her remains, there were actually several newspapers that began reporting that Jeannette could have been a victim of human sacrifice carried out by a local coven of witches who allegedly operated inside a nearby Watchung Reservation, which is the largest nature reserve in Union County, New Jersey. And I also want to point out that where Jeannette's body was discovered on that cliff in that park, that specific cliff that her body was on was referred to by locals as the Devil's Teeth. So it obviously helps people buy into this theory of Jeannette's death as a part of some sort of satanic ritual if her body is found on this Devil's Teeth cliff, and there's all these rumors already floating around about satanic rituals and Satanism and sacrifices and witchcraft. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And I want to kind of circle back around to what we talked about Jeannette's body having lead in it at the time that it was discovered. It had a very unusually high amount of lead that wasn't able to be explained by the medical examiner. And I do want to say, after doing some research, there have been multiple people who have stated that lead is used in witchcraft. I'm not exactly sure what it's used for, that I was unable to find. However, people have referred to lead being used in witchcraft. People have also pinned the rocks and wooden sticks that were shaped in the form of a cross surrounding Jeannette's body as the result of a ritualistic killing. But again, this is really all just speculation. There's never been anything that has said for a certain fact that this all is a result of witchcraft or Satanism. So let's move away from that whole theory for a second. The witchcraft, Satanism, that whole thing. Let's move away from it for a second and talk about some of the other theories that have been at play in this case. When Jeannette's body was discovered, a tip came into the authorities that stated that there was a homeless man who often hung around the park that Jeannette's body was found at. And it was said that this homeless man, who was referred to by the name Red, that's his name, and it was said that shortly after Jeannette went missing, Red actually left the park. And so because of the coincidence in timing, people thought it was very possible that Red could have had something to do with Jeannette's disappearance. However, authorities did track him down and interrogated him and realized that he had nothing to do with Jeannette's disappearance. Now, I want to talk about an officer who worked on this case, and he was actually the first one to discover Jeannette's body, and that is a man man named Donald Schwart. So he was working for the Springfield Police Department at the time of Jeannette's murder, and over time he was promoted to be a lieutenant, I believe. However, at this time he was an officer, and I'm going to read you some of the quotes directly from him regarding the discovery of Jeannette and what possibly he believes happened. So according to him, he said, quote, "I'm the one who found the body. It was hard. I have 5 daughters, and this could have been one of my daughters. When I got up there, the body was lying right there. She had tan pants and a navy blue shirt," end quote. Now, Donald is one of the people who does not believe that Jeannette's death was a result of a ritualistic killing. He believes that those rumors actually began from a different officer who saw Jeannette's body and made a remark that it possibly looked satanic. Donald said, quote, "There was nothing to that. I don't know what happened. There's a lot of theories out there, a lot of people speculating this and that. I don't buy it. They were probably doing drugs and she OD'd." End quote. However, again, there was never any evidence of any drugs in Jeannette's system. That's why this has all been kind of concluded to be a homicide, is because there was never any drugs found in Jeannette's system. The only thing that was found in her system was lead. So that is why it is believed to be a homicide instead of an overdose. Now, something interesting that Donald also pointed out was the fact that Jeannette was wearing flip-flops when her body was discovered. He said, quote, "Somebody had to be with her because she had flip-flops on. I was in hiking boots and I had trouble getting up that little hill where she was laying. With flip-flops, she would have had a hell of a time getting up that hill." Donald also said that him and the other officers were informed that some of the people that Jeannette hung out with were also involved in drugs. He said, quote, "We figured after this period of time, somebody would maybe come forward and have the heart to say, I was there or I know what happened, but nobody has come forward." End quote. Now, Jeannette's nephew has also come out and made a statement regarding his aunt's death, and Jeannette's nephew's name is Ray Sajeski. And Ray does not believe that this was a result of a satanic ritual or an overdose. Ray has said, quote, "That's not what happened. She was no angel, but she wasn't a drug addict. It was the 70s and a lot of people smoked pot. It was normal. But no, it wasn't drugs. No way. Whoever did it knows they did it, and I don't even know if they're still alive," end quote. And I think that that is a very good point to make, because I think we have to remember the time period that this is all happening, because when we think drugs and we think drug overdose, a lot of the time we don't think of weed, we think of the hardcore drugs. And back then in the 1970s, the early 1970s, especially when people were steering more farther away from drugs such as weed, a lot of people did, and still to this day really do, see weed as a hardcore drug. And they could have thought that because Jeannette was smoking weed that she was this drug addict and hanging out with druggy friends and whatever, but that could simply just not be the case if you compare it to today and just looking at it from a broader spectrum. However, we don't know what type of drugs that she was using. She could have very well been using hardcore drugs. However, from the sound of it and just from the sound of this case in general and reading what I have read in my research, it seems that the drugs that she dabbled in was more so just weed. So that's an important thing to note as well. So there are a lot more questions than answers in this case. And are there weird coincidences with satanic rituals and witchcraft and things like that? Absolutely. There are a lot of strange coincidences. However, do I personally believe that Jeannette's death was a result of a satanic ritual, witchcraft, or human sacrifice? I do not. I think Jeannette's death is a murder. I think it is a homicide, and I think that there is someone responsible for it. However, I personally do not fully believe in this whole witchcraft theory. Now, a big question that I had when doing my research, and I noticed a lot of other people had as well when reading the comments about this case, was Jeannette's arm. It struck me as odd. It's kind of like I said in the beginning, the reason I explained it the way that I did was because it almost seems too coincidental. The dog goes over to this girl, finds her on a cliff, rips off her arm, and takes the arm to the owner. It just sounds a little too ironic and coincidental, I guess. Some questions that I have when it comes to the arm is, how was the arm found? Did the dog rip the arm off of Jeannette, or was the arm already amputated off of her body and the dog just found it and picked it up? Because just because the dog found the arm doesn't mean that the dog ripped the arm off of her body. Which, if that's the case, it leads me to the question of of how was this arm amputated. And I wonder if they were able to look at the way that the arm was taken from her body and to see if it was through bite marks or to see if it more was so a clean cut. I'm sure that is something that they've looked into. However, that was a question that I had, is it a little too coincidental that this dog just so happened to find Jeanette and amputate her arm from her body and bring it to its owner? Then again, I'm just kind of a skeptic, so I don't know. Maybe that is just what happened, and I don't know. So now I want to bring in a whole new theory for you. This is the last theory that we have, and this theory involves a man named Reverend James Tate. Reverend Tate was the pastor at the church that Jeanette and her family attended. And after Jeanette went missing and her body was discovered, Reverend Tate was actually one of the first people to be interviewed by the newspapers. If you remember how I said that 2 weeks after Jeanette's remains were discovered, there was a newspaper article released about Jeanette being involved in Satanism. Well, those articles included interviews from Reverend Tate, who confirmed to the public that Jeanette and her sister had struggled with drug use in the past. The Reverend said, quote, "I'm sure Jeanette herself wasn't involved in anything like that, but I know that many of the other young people in this area are involved. Kids tell us that when they are on drugs, they are in the control of Satan. They do things they don't want to do and they say things they don't want to say because of the power of evil." End quote. And it was said that Reverend Tate and Jeanette had a very close relationship. And Jeanette was actually working with Reverend Tate on a program that was supposed to help teens who struggled with drug addiction. So they did spend a lot of time together. Now, when I was doing my research, I had a lot of questions regarding Jeanette's love life and the possible existence of a love life for her. Did she have a guy that she liked? She was 16 years old. Was she dating at all? Or was she just very invested in her religion and devoted to her religion that she didn't want to date? And I did end up finding out something pretty interesting. Now, Jeanette was dating and she did have a boyfriend, and Jeanette's boyfriend is actually Reverend Tate's son. Reverend Tate's son is a man named Wayne Tate, and Wayne and Jeanette actually broke up just about a week or two prior to her disappearance and murder. Now, according to Wayne, he describes this relationship as an innocent romance. They only saw each other when they were at church together. They obviously never engaged in any sexual activity. However, learning this definitely did make me want to dive more into this potential theory, because to me, I find it very ironic the fact that Jeanette stops dating the Reverend's son a week prior to her disappearance. Was Wayne upset that Jeanette was involving herself and surrounding herself with people who were doing drugs and thought that it was going against the religion and that she was rebelling? Did Reverend Tate perform some ritual on Jeanette that would get rid of her sins and rid her from the drugs that she was surrounding herself with and the wrong crowd that she was surrounding herself with, and the ritual went wrong and Jeanette ended up dead? Did Reverend Tate tell Jeanette and almost convince her that she did have a drug problem and that he could cure her and that he could help her by performing some ritual? Was Wayne possibly involved? Did Reverend Tate make advances at Jeanette and she shut him down? I think that these are very possible theories that I am kind of mind blown or so just kind of looked over because of this heavy theory in this that Satanism and witchcraft was involved in this. To me, Reverend Tate is so much more of a possibility than some satanic ritual from who? Who would perform the satanic ritual? It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. However, when I see that and I read about Reverend Tate and Wayne and the weird connection, it just doesn't seem like a coincidence. It seems like too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence for me. A lot of people thought it was bizarre that Reverend Tate almost ran to the media to talk about Jeanette and her involvement in drugs and being involved in the wrong crowd. Was that to try and steer the information? Was that to try and steer the perspective of this away from any other possibility other than drugs? However, there is a reason that this case is still unsolved. It is still unsolved to this day. No one has figured figured out what exactly happened to Jeanette that day. And that is why I am so interested to hear what you guys have to say. And let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think that this was some satanic ritual? Just because I don't believe it doesn't mean that it's not true. So let me know what you think in the comments below on this one. And with that being said, you guys, that is all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another true crime episode here on my YouTube channel. You should subscribe and join the family. I love you guys so much, and I'll be back in a couple days with a brand new one. Bye, guys.